We now move to communications on a motion by Councillor Siddiqui to place communications 1 through 3 on file. All those in favor say aye.
Mayor?
Oh, you want to pull one? Councillor?
I'd like to pull number 2, please.
On placing 1 and 3 on file, all those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Communication number 2. A communication was received from Michael Turk regarding Baker's Housing Choice Bill and NAIOP. Councillor Zondervan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to draw my colleagues' attention to this letter, which is regarding the Massachusetts chapter of NIOP, which markets itself as the Commercial Real Estate Development Association of Massachusetts. And I would first like to read the letter because I think it makes some very important points. To the Honorable City Council, the Housing Choices Bill proposed by the Governor and commonly referred to as the Baker Bill was the subject of an extended discussion on December 17th in the Cambridge City Council. As I noted then in my public comment, the text of the bill gave short shrift to affordable housing and opened the door to a not insignificant increase in commercial development. In the course of that evening's discussion, attention was drawn to the large role that NIOP had in spearheading that legislation. According to its website, NIOP of Massachusetts represents the interest of companies involved with the development, ownership, management, and financing of commercial properties. Moreover, with regard to its advocacy for those interests, it asserts NIOP has firmly established itself as the successful voice of the real estate industry. In fact, NIOP has touted its ability to shape legislation at the State House, complete with a list of 2018 government affairs accomplishments, a copy of which is enclosed as Attachment A. As to the Baker Bill, it states the following: championed a coalition of business, real estate groups, and the Mass Municipal Association to support the housing choices legislation, which would have allowed cities and towns to adopt zoning best practices by a simple majority vote rather than the current 2/3 supermajority, end quote. There is no question that the Baker Bill was an industry bill. 2 other observations about NIOP are pertinent here. First of all, there are other pieces of legislation on NIOP's list of accomplishments that thwarted actions taken in some fashion by Cambridge legislators. For example, NIOP claimed to have, quote, defeated separate climate change legislation supported by environmentalists and members of the Cambridge delegation at the State House because such legislation encumbered development. NIOP also, quote, blocked restrictions on landlords that would have required tenants' right of first refusal, end quote. The Cambridge City Council had voted its support for this measure as enabling legislation. Second, in light of the development that has taken place in Cambridge, it is not surprising that a number of the commercial real estate firms represented on NIOP's board of directors are active in Cambridge. What may be somewhat surprising in that regard, though, is the fact that among such firms represented on NIOP's board of directors are Harvard University and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology Investment Management Company, see Attachment B. This sets the matter of town-gown relations in a new dimension. In general, to what extent does NIOP serve as a vehicle for the universities to participate in lobbying on a broad range of matters regarding real estate without being visible? More specifically, one is struck by the disjuncture between the fervent, quote, commitment to sustainability and resilience, end quote, both universities express in their town-gown reports, and their subordination of environmental concerns to development through their role in NIOP. Respectfully submitted, Michael Turk. So this organization's legislative efforts are a case study in how commercial interests influence our politics in Cambridge. And we like to think that we don't have the kind of influence mongering here that exists at the federal level. And because we represent a tiny piece of the American pie, we certainly don't have influence mongering at the same level. But within our purview, particularly around real estate development and land use, we continue to see strong pressure from industry and their lobbyists to build, baby, build. What are some of the consequences of this focus on growth? There are many, and NIOP's own remarkable list of legislative accomplishments.
Councillor, I'm just trying to get at this letter. I'm trying to get at what what your point is here.
My point is that this letter highlights the influence of commercial interests on our efforts here in Cambridge to deal with certain problems that affect our lives and the environment. NIOP claims victory for defeating a radical, that's their words, anti-wage theft bill. So even as the real estate industry regularly trots out hardworking union laborers to beg us to approve building projects that creates jobs they desperately need, it's fighting with the other hand to defeat efforts at ensuring contractors and wage laborers are paid a living wage. They seek to suppress the cost of doing business, even if it means worsening economic inequality and poverty. This is how business is done, and it's time that we acknowledge that many of our big business practices are corrosive to our society and directly contradict the goals that we claim to espouse on this very council. NIOP claims victory in defeating several environmental and climate change protection bills because they could have resulted in, according to them, needless delays and legal challenges. NIOP also claims to have lobbied the Board of Building Regulations and Standards against adopting stringent solar standards, stretch energy codes, and electric vehicle readiness mandates. In other words, we can't have environmental protections and climate change response with actual teeth because that might get in the way of development.
Councillor, I'm going to move to close discussion. This isn't a time for a soapbox on this. I don't understand what the.
I would like to finish my statement, please.
How much longer, Councillor?
A few more minutes. So we end up with difficult challenges in Cambridge. We have massive canopy loss that we're trying to deal with. We have devastating global climate change all over the planet. We have continued resistance to necessary changes, even here in Cambridge, to respond to these existential, life and property threatening disasters because it might get in the way of these development interests, which are largely responsible for these problems in the first place. We love to rail against our fossil fuel in chief for refusing to acknowledge the need to end our dependence on fossil fuels, which is the primary driver of climate change, but we ourselves refuse to come to terms with the fact that our growth above all approach is part and parcel of the same self-destruction that humans are inflicting on our civilization. And it gets worse because institutions like Harvard and MIT are proud members of NIOP, and the current head of MTIMCO is the former head of NIOP Massachusetts. These institutions of higher learning are our community partners who should be, and in many cases are, helping us and leading the way on responding to climate change and environmental destruction. And yet at the same time, we give them a free pass for their support of lobbyists like NIOP. I'm hoping that shining some light on these connections will help my colleagues and the public better understand what we're up against when we try to take on climate change, inequality, and housing. I will close with housing because it's affirmed to be our highest priority in the council and certainly presents a major challenge to many residents of our city. While we go to bat for our tenants at risk, while we honestly and carefully debate housing policy and tenant protections, NIOP at the state level seeks to boost commercial development while fighting back against efforts to protect tenants or keep rents from rising. Why? Obviously to maximize their profits.
We don't have a quorum in the room. We have to have a recess.
Even if they got half, which is really all the thing makes sense. It's a lot. It's 120,000 square feet, 120 units, as opposed to the 40 that they're showing. Just put that in your mind and yeah, what I'm going to propose is that we focus on the commercial districts where the change is going to occur. And I think the city, which the city doesn't want to do, is to buy as they come up. And I'm telling you everything I'm thinking, and we literally condominiumize the building and potential building. The city retains the retail, the nonprofits build. I mean, you're not down the building, but in essence, so the retail is kept low rate. I'm sorry. Yeah, it's just pictures, it's not a plan. No, who's got this? You still have to have the plan. And you know, the kicker is who we're going to send it out to. They took a portion of the drawing and not the whole drawing. I know it wasn't you. I don't know. Was it in the correct drawing last week? I don't remember. I don't remember. It might have been. Seems funny that we have this guy on this one. It just, yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's the exact same thing. And I think what it is, it's a big picture, and they submitted that instead of submitting an 8 by 11. Right. Just check and make sure it wasn't our printing. So I think there's version and on.
Quorum being present, council is back in session. Councilor Zondervan, I'm going to give you 30 more seconds here, and then this is nothing that council can act on. This is just a speech you're making.
Thank you.
There's no action before the council, so
I appreciate
30
that.
seconds, then I'm going to ask that we close discussion.
So, among their accomplishments, NIOP lists defeated far-reaching zoning legislation that would have added expense and delay to the land development process in Massachusetts, eliminating the approval not required process, reducing the scope of zoning freeze protection under current law, authorizing impact fees without limitation, and mandating inclusionary zoning without incentives. So they are fighting against things that we are directly trying to advance here on the City Council, including inclusionary zoning. I encourage my colleagues to read this letter and to understand these connections and how they influence the work that we are trying to do here on the council. As Dr. Luther King said, it is never too late to do the right thing.
I'm moving closed
and
discussion.
That is true today as ever. Thank you for your attention.
I guess we don't have to now. Placing the matter on file. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. On a motion by Councillor Simmons to adopt resolutions 1 through 5, making unanimous upon adoption, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Oh, I read number 5 wrong. Happy 40th birthday, and then I read Councillor Toomey. So congratulations, you're 40 again.
Happy birthday, Councilor Toomey. You look so good at 40.
Go.
I'd
Who
like
knew?
to challenge that statement.
We now move to policy orders. On a motion by Councillor Simmons to bring the policy order list before us for discussion and adoption. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Pleasure of the council. Councillor
Chair,
Simmons.
I'd like to pull 5 and 6.